Hello, and welcome to a presentation on relationships in families, also known as attachment theory. I will be presenting some information and also giving you some good ideas for working with school-age children. I hope you enjoy. There are 5 objectives to this presentation. The first one is to define close relationships in middle childhood. 2, to summarize attachment and family systems theories. 3, to describe current research on parent, child, and sibling interaction in middle childhood. 4, to discuss the influences of family diversity on school-age children. And 5, to explain the contributions of family, school, and community to close relationships in middle childhood. Attachments are based largely on the interactions of school-age children with their families. Research has shown that family relations in middle childhood are based on the study of parent, child, and sibling relationships. Family relations are enduring ties or connections between family members composed of frequent interdependent action sequences that occur across diverse settings and tasks. There have been various theories that guide the existing research on family relations in middle childhood, primarily attachment theories and family system theories. Theories of attachment have been an important part of relationship development since the mid-20th century, focusing primarily on the importance of early relationships, especially the mother-infant bond attachment theories that have been used to describe relationship histories across the lifespan from infancy to adulthood. Psychoanalysis focuses primarily on the development of individuals. Attachment theory, however, focuses on the development of relationships. John Bowlby was a psychoanalyst, and he believed that mental health and behavioral problems could be attributed to early childhood. Bowlby's evolutionary theory of attachment suggests that children come into this world biologically pre-programmed to form attachments with others because this would help them survive. Bowlby described a developmental sequence of attachment relationships in the first 3 years of life. The goal of attachment is to move from a totally dependent relationship with an attachment figure in infancy to a more independent partnership. There are 4 stages of attachment. 1. Pre-attachment. 2. Attachment in the making. 3. Clear-cut attachment. And 4. Goal-corrected partnership. Let's go over each stage. In pre-attachment, in middle childhood, children tend to spend more time with certain people and they seek friendships. In attachment in the making, middle childhood children confide in parents, siblings, or friends, and they tend to smile, giggle, tell jokes, and they talk on the phone or via text message. Clear-cut attachment, they feel more bold in their exploration if a close friend or favorite teacher is nearby, and they turn to family, friends, or teachers for reassurance. In goal-corrected partnership, they express concern over separations from family or close friends. For example, in a divorce or moving to another city, they seek psychological, not physical availability, and they withdraw when their needs cannot be met. Bowlby was influenced by ethology, or the study of animal behavior, such as research on imprinting or following behavior in goslings like Lorenz in 1970, and comfort-seeking behaviors in infant monkeys separated from their mothers at birth. Bowlby theorized that children turn to their parents for security, and in middle childhood and adolescence, they also seek proximity in their peers for a safe haven from distress. However, attachment goals are often made by their peers and friends in a request for social connections to others beyond their families. The lifespan research has documented that the 4 stages of attachment mentioned above apply to both middle childhood and infancy. There are 4 categories of attachment. 1. Anxious avoidant. 2. Secure. 3. Anxious resistant. And 4. Disorganized. In anxious avoidant, middle childhood children show little to no distress when left alone, and they look away and actively avoid parents. In secure, middle childhood children use their mother as a base for exploration. Anxious resistant, they are visibly distressed, they fail to explore, they are distressed during separation, and are ambivalent upon parental reunion. In disorganized, they appear to be confused or disoriented. The self-report methods used by older children, adolescents, and adults have been useful for determining attachment classifications. Another self-report measure, the People in My Life scale, also known as the PIML scale, have been used successfully with 5th and 6th graders. Attachment is not a personality trait, but more of as a feature in particular relationship. It is important to remember that insecure attachment classification applies only to the relationship being studied at that time. It was also theorized that Bowlby said that early attachments in parents or other caregivers form the basis of all future relationships through the mechanism of internal working model or the mental representation of all relationships. In this perspective, we can say that school-age children continue to be affected by early attachment relationships to others' so-called objects. Other developmental researchers have tested that the working model hypothesis through longitudinal studies after attachment theory was first proposed by Bowlby. It has been suggested by some researchers that middle childhood may be the period when children begin to integrate their working models into attachment style or be consistent. We are related to others. All of our first relationships are usually family relationships. From an attachment theory perspective, families, particularly parents and sibling interactions, will influence school-age children's relationships with their peers. From a family systems view, interpreting the quality of a relationship between two people also requires to examine the forces that contribute to and emerge from their interactions. Parent-child relationships become increasingly reciprocal during middle childhood. Parent-child interaction consists less of caregiving or playing and more of supervising from a distance than in early childhood. Since both the individual child development and changing social expectations are changing, parent-child relationships in middle childhood involve increased cognitive abilities for solving concrete problems, greater physical and social knowledge, more involvement with peers and contacts outside the family, increased emphasis on school adjustment and academic achievement, and greater capacity for self-regulation and social responsibility. Parenting research has recently been criticized for assuming that parenting practices cause developmental outcomes, even though those studies have been correlational. Parenting scholars have proposed a systems approach to our conceptualizing communication processes within families as an alternative, meaning that parenting behaviors such as support or criticism can evoke emotional reactions with their children which in turn influence how children respond to their parents. There are 4 different parenting styles. Parenting styles are the ways that parents guide their children's behavior. Parenting practices have been studied separately from parenting styles. Parenting practices refers to the goal-directed parenting behaviors that parents engage to socialize their children. There are 4 parenting styles. 1. Authoritative, which includes high levels of control and warmth. Authoritarian, controlling but low in warmth. Permissive, warm but low in control. Or uninvolved, neither warm nor controlling. Research has demonstrated that authoritative parenting is associated with positive psychosocial outcomes. Research has indicated that authoritative parents raise children who achieve more in school, score higher on self-esteem, and report less depression and anxiety, and are less likely to engage in problem behavior. Positive benefits of authoritative parents have constantly been reported from all racial or ethnic groups and nationalities. Researchers have closely examined which aspects of authoritative parenting contribute to positive outcomes. Parental involvement and support were positively related to psychosocial development, whereas in behavior control, although reducing behavioral problems, was negatively related on emotional well-being. Differential parenting results when parents treat siblings differently from one another. Differential positivity refers to one child in the family receiving more positive effect, engagement, and involvement from the parent than another child in the family. Differential negativity refers to the parent directing more effectively negative behavior toward one child than another. School-age children experience greater well-being and self-esteem when they perceive the differential treatment to be fair. Differential treatment of siblings has been suggested by behavior genetic researchers who investigate that parenting is part of a shared environment. Parents usually report they treat their children similar in terms of knowledge of their activities, attempts to control their behavior, and successes in controlling them. Children, however, report that their parents treat them differently from siblings. Sibling interaction has been the focus in the study of middle childhood close relationships. In some ways, siblings are like peers. The nature and level of negativity between siblings is likely to differ from that of friends for 2 reasons. 1. Siblings are not usually the same age. Children often assume a leader or follower role with siblings. And 2. Sibling relationships are not voluntary. Children are likely to invest in maintaining harmony with peers because they can lose their friendships. Sibling interaction styles have been identified by sibling researchers. Those sibling interaction styles are 1. Harmonious. They are compassionate or caring about sibling relationships. 2. They're typical. Relationships that are characterized by ambivalence among siblings. And 3. They are conflicted. Sibling relationships that are hostile or alienated. In siblings and gender sibling dyads, difference between children's perspective according to their gender composition. In a longitudinal study across middle childhood and early adolescence, it has shown that older or firstborn siblings' gender role, attitudes, personality characteristics, and leisure activities predicted their younger or second-born siblings' gender roles orientations 2 years later. Firstborn siblings can often become more gender stereotyped between the ages of 10 and 12, also known as gender intensification. Most girls, however, are less traditional in terms of sex roles than boys, especially boys with younger sisters. Adolescents from mixed-sex sibling dyads are more likely to have friends who are instrumental qualities or masculine qualities, who engage in masculine stereotyped activities. It has been known that in many cultures, older siblings, especially the girls, take care of younger siblings. Although it might not be in a frequent industrialized countries like the United States, sibling caretaking is a primary form of childcare in many agrarian societies. Sibling caregiving promotes interdependence and pro-social behavior within the family context. Family interactions from a contextual perspective of middle childhood can vary as a result of both differences in the family environment and the larger culture in which families are embedded. Scholars from the family communication have described families as discourse dependent. They define themselves through social interaction. School-age children reveal their understanding of family relationships when they talk about their families. For example, they use labeling by saying my brother or my sister. They use explaining by saying, how come your parents are Irish but you're Chinese? The next way is by legitimizing, by maybe asking, is she your real daughter? Or also by defending, he is my father, even if he didn't marry my mom. 69% of children under the age of 18 live with two married parents, and only 7% of married couple families with children have a mother who does not work outside of the home. Living in a two-parent household does not necessarily mean that the children live with their biological parents. 88% of children live with their biological parents, some unmarried. 7% live with their biological mother and stepfather, and 2% with their biological father and stepmother, and 1% with adoptive mother and stepfather. Cohabitating couples, or couples who live together in a romantic relationship but are unmarried, account to up to 40 to 50% of births outside of marriage. Families that live together include single parenting, grandparenting, and gay parenting. Single parenting is made up of 1/4 of all U.S. households, with 28% of children under the age of 18 living with a single parent in the United States. Living arrangements of children and single parenting families vary greatly by race or ethnicity. In grandparenting, about 8%, nearly 5.5 million of American children live in intergenerational households with a grandparent. About 1/4, or 2.4 million, have sole responsibility for raising grandchildren. Grandparents who are raising their grandchildren compared to other parents are less well educated, younger at birth of their first child, single, African American, and female. Reasons for grandparents to take the parenting role vary from wanting to help their adult children in a time of crisis to being the only relative available. Grandparents also serve as co-parents with their adult children. In gay parenting, gay families could include gay or lesbian partners who may have adopted children conceived through donor insemination, or are raising their children from a previous heterosexual relationship. Based on research from over 2 decades, it has shown that children who are raised in gay or lesbian families confirm that sexual orientation of parents is not a factor in child outcomes. Families who live apart include separation and divorce, remarriage, and step-families, child custody, and transnational families. It is important to note that some families may reside together in a household, such as single-parent family or step-families, but others are in divorced families or transnational families live apart from each other in more than one geographic location. Research has shown that children who are from divorced families have more behavioral problems compared to those who live with two parents. Children from parents who are divorced are more prone to depression, antisocial behavior, impulsive hyperactive behavior, or low academic achievement. Children who have personality and behavior problems may not only be more vulnerable to effects of parents' divorce, but are also more likely to have parents who later divorce. The quality of parenting before, during, and after a divorce are impacted indirectly by conflict. Both behavioral and emotional adjustment problems have been linked to parental conflict in both boys and girls. Adolescent boys from divorced families have more delinquent behaviors when both parents engage in active, authoritative, competitive parenting. In remarriage and step-families, about 5 to 6% of school-aged children live in step-families. Parents remarry within 5 years of getting divorced, and they add new relationship stress to children's lives as they adjust to step-parents and or step-siblings. Children between the ages of 14 and 17 demonstrate more behavioral problems, and boys are often exposed to more conflict than girls. School-age children experience multiple moves and school transitions, and stepchildren often receive lower grades and scores on achievement tests. In custody, joint custody is defined as either shared physical custody with children, spending about equal time with both parents, or shared legal custody with their primary residence, often remaining with one parent. Children have a higher divorce adjustment, as well as general, emotional, and behavioral adjustment. They have better family relationships and have a higher self-esteem when parents are granted joint custody. One of the most difficult relationships for school-aged children may often be ambiguous relationship to a non-custodial parent. Non-custodial parents do not have physical or legal custody of their children. They have either been removed or voluntarily absent from their children. It is increasingly rare for post-divorce parents to have little to no involvement with their children. The majority of parents engage in parallel parenting, in which low conflict, no communication, and emotional disengagement between the ex-partners are the most typical features. In transnational families, approximately 35 million people, or 12% of the U.S. population, were identified as foreign-born. Transnational families occurs when some members of the family are anchored in one place, but where family relationships transcend national boundaries. Practitioners who work with new immigrant families have recommended that parents and children together examine family photographs taken in both former and new countries of residence. Family stories are produced through social interaction to make sense of migration experiences as seen through a family service systems perspective. Family, school, and community are viewed as an ecological context in which family relations are embedded. Those three contexts serve as an applied lens for examining specific relational issues in middle childhood. It has been suggested by developmental scholars that continuities in attachment styles may depend on the stability of child-rearing environments over time. In some families, however, children may spend less time with extended family members such as aunts, cousins, or grandparents than others. Associations between closeness to the maternal grandparents and children Social emotional adjustment was found only for children living with both of their biological parents or with their mother and a stepfather. In a national study of grandparenting styles, three distinct patterns were noted. One, compassionate, being that 50% of grandparents enjoyed recreational activities, occasional overnight stays, and in babysitting. Two, remote. 30% of grandparents had emotionally distant relationships, usually because they live far away from their grandchildren. And three, involved. About 15% of grandparents had more frequent interactions or were living with their grandchildren, sometimes known as custodial grandparents. School context. Schools serve as an important context for the development of attachment relationships in middle childhood. A teacher can serve as a secure base for school-age children and contribute to the positive school adjustment, particularly in children with disorganized attachment relationships. A higher academic achievement and lower likelihood of disciplinary problems, especially with girls, has been associated with strong attachment bonds between teachers and adolescents. Community context. Parents' perceptions of the particular settings in which their children interact has given meaning to parenting practices. Perceptions of neighborhood safety and children's degree of access to the wider community has had a significant impact on parenting practices based on African American mothers' perceptions. Research on parents' limit setting has suggested that firm, strict parenting is likely to result in more positive outcomes for African American youth. Even though neighborhood residence can be a direct source of economic despair for families with school-age children, neighborhood conditions can also have an independent effect on children's physical, emotional, and educational outcomes. Three models for understanding how neighborhood contexts affect middle childhood development have been proposed by developmental science scholars. They include the following emphasis. 1. Institutional research. This, for example, would be parks, libraries, childcare, healthcare, and even employment. 2. Relationships, parenting practices, emotional availability, and supportive home environments. 3. Community norms, for example, normal systems of support, monitoring of public safety, and working together toward common goals.